Very gratified, and we thank you, all of you, for the support in the press that we've had. I was up in Toronto last night at the invitation of the CTV network.
A tape was passed along to the censors at CBS. It was just a matter of minutes before alarm bells began to sound throughout the hallways. As opposed to the typical comedic routine, the screen was loaded with a political commentary that was clear and powerful. After a period of 6 days, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was abruptly discontinued without any explanation, without a news conference, and without a farewell. The videotape was never broadcast, but the aftershocks it caused waves to go across the television business, which in turn sparked a heated conflict between artists and censors. After that point, the idea of free expression on American television was fundamentally altered in a way that can never be replaced. Where did the action take place behind the scenes? Who made the decision to turn off the gas? And what does the recording contain that caused CBS to go into a state of panic? We are going to take a look at the astonishing event that completely altered the regulations that govern television in the United States. NBC, ABC, and CBS were the three major networks that controlled the television industry in the United States during the 1960s. The moral, political, and cultural norms of the post-war era were adhered to by the carefully edited programs that millions of families watched every night. These programs were meticulously edited to comply with social norms. During that time period, CBS was the dominant force in the industry thanks to its safe series, such as Bonanza and The Ed Sullivan Show.
Just a crease. He ain't hurt bad.
Better have a good story this time.
In spite of this, CBS was compelled to come up with a fresh strategy in order to maintain its audience as the anti-war movement and the counterculture among young people continued to grow. The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was not conceived as a daring breakthrough. Rather, it was a necessity to compete with NBC, particularly in the Sunday primetime slot, when Bonanza controlled the ratings. This was the primary motivation behind the notion. Tom and Dick Smothers, two brothers who had a humorous style that was characterized by a smart brother, dumb brother dynamic, had been well-liked on lesser shows and were regarded as a choice that was sufficiently safe. CBS had high hopes that they would be able to reimagine the framework of variety shows without causing any content issues.
It's a form of responsibility.
That certainly is. But that's comments. I'm glad you said that because
the first episode of the show aired on February 5th, 1967. Following the same style as the previous episodes, the first one went off without a hitch, with musical numbers, humorous banter between the brothers, and some straightforward comedic moments. Nevertheless, Tom Smothers was working on something else behind the scenes. He did not want to be a mere diversion. That is for sure. Tom started incorporating political and social concepts into the performance while he was pretending to be funny. The lines, which appeared to be harmless at first, progressively became more distinct and multi-layered. Tom took advantage of the chance to create a new playground, one in which television did not shy away from reality, but rather confronted it and questioned it. This was while CBS was concentrating on ratings. Dick Smothers did not raise any objections, although he did exercise caution. Balancer, the presenter who moderated Tom's abrasive words, was the character that he played on the show. Despite the fact that the change occurred gradually, it was slow enough for CBS to avoid intervening too soon, but it was also quick enough for viewers to notice. Pete Seeger, a prominent figure in the anti-war movement, had the honor of being the first significant guest. Artists such as Harry Belafonte, Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplane, and The Who followed in their footsteps thereafter. Not only did the musical acts provide entertainment, but they also made a personal statement. Prime time on national television included songs that discussed topics such as war, injustice, and liberation. In addition to this, the show started employing younger writers who were more politically conscious, such as Steve Martin and Mason Williams. Beginning as a situation comedy, the script ultimately evolved into a satirical one. Suddenly, humorous folk tunes were broken by fictitious disputes over the approach that the military should take. Church or civil liberty are two examples. The arrangement of the show remained the same as before: music, talk, and comedic acts. On the other hand, the contents of the box were quite different. Throughout the course of the show's first season, the number of viewers continuously increased. College campuses started to recognize it as a voice of representation on television, and this perception was especially strong among the age group of 18 to 25 years old. In a pattern that began to emerge, students began to share quotes from the show. While this was going on, a number of parents and local stations in the South started sending letters to express their dissatisfaction with the material. Despite the fact that CBS was aware of the division in its audience, the network proceeded to broadcast it because the ratings were still better than anticipated. Internally at CBS, executives started to experience a sense of losing control. In the event where Tom believed it was vital to maintain the integrity of the message, he refused to change lines. There were a lot of episodes that were re-edited right before they were shown, or they were sent out behind schedule. Despite this, the show continued to run, and whenever it did, it presented CBS with a fresh issue. Both viewers and the people who created the show had great expectations for the beginning of the second season. Over time, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour evolved into something more than just a comedy show. It was a unique television platform that allowed for the discussion of subjects that were ignored in other places. Given the continually increasing popularity, particularly among younger viewers, CBS was ready to take risks with the show, so long as it did not push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. However, Tom Smothers' interpretation of what boundary meant to him was always evolving. The subsequent musical performances continued to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable for the evening. There was a song performed by Jefferson Airplane that has psychedelic undertones. With their performance of My Generation, The Who caused the sound system to malfunction due to its destructive nature. While this was going on, Joan Baez caused a stir by singing a song that was dedicated to her husband, who was doing time in prison for refusing military duty. The explanation for this incident was removed from the broadcast in the United States. In addition to the music, the comic segment of the show started to pose a threat to the established media system. Pat Paulson, a comedian who was hired expressly for the editorial section, acted out a series of skits in which he impersonated a contender for the presidency. To put the patience of voters to the test, the speeches made fun of the policies that are now in place and made promises such as, "If elected, I will build more potholes." Despite the fact that the content appeared to be innocent, politicians were embarrassed by it because it perfectly mirrored the frustration that people have with the formality of politics. But the most significant disagreement with CBS was with David Steinberg. Late in 1968, he began broadcasting his sermonettes, which were actually fake church sermons. Through the use of a sardonic tone, Steinberg transformed religious characters into emblems of political power, combining elements of scripture with contemporary events. CBS got more than 300 complaints in a single week on a particular skit that was shown in October 1968. The skit was vehemently rejected by numerous CBS affiliates because it was disrespectful to their views. The public's response was a bit different. Steinberg was the subject of the students' notebooks, where they took notes. It was then that unofficial video stores started selling the chopped clips again. Essays that provided an analysis of the show were published in college newspapers. For a great number of young people, the show was the only television program in the United States that accurately portrayed the world in which they lived. As the show gained increasing popularity, CBS became more and more humiliated by its performance. Regulations on censorship got more stringent. CBS demanded that each episode be sent in for review 10 days in advance of its scheduled airtime. This deadline was regularly missed by Tom Smothers, who purposefully extended post-production in order to maintain the same lines through successive violations. There was no longer any concealment of the conflict that had arisen between the creative staff and the executives of CBS. The tension between the two parties increased progressively during their meetings. It was not officially published, but CBS started paying great attention to each and every script, as well as every person that was invited to appear on stage. For the time being, Dick Smothers served as a balancing act. Despite the fact that he was openly opposed to every decision that Tom made, he did not object in public. It became Dick's personal priority to ensure that the show continued to air. But Tom's objective was to ensure that the message was communicated, regardless of the repercussions. As early as 1969, CBS had completely lost all patience. Alternate options were being discussed by executives. There were local affiliates in the South that were really considering pulling the plug. Numerous sponsors expressed their worry. After that, CBS realized that the bar had been passed for the final time when David Steinberg was brought back for another part, this time one that was more direct and more political. Forbidden Lecture. At the beginning of April 1969, an episode of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was finished during the production process that took place in the residence. There was a unique aspect of the episode that the authors of the show were well familiar with. The return of David Steinberg was accompanied with a fresh sermonette. Following the incident that occurred towards the end of the previous year, CBS had issued a warning that any appearance by Steinberg would constitute a significant threat to the show. However, Tom Smothers made the decision to bring him back, regardless of the ramifications that might result. During the performance, Steinberg appeared on stage dressed as a rabbi, and the stage was designed to look like a church. The spotlight was directed towards the pulpit, and the stage was placed against a minimalist backdrop. Within the span of fewer than 5 minutes, he transformed the audience's perception of Moses from that of a biblical figure to that of a contemporary anti-war activist. It was not God who gave Moses the command to lead the Israelites across the sea in the performance. Rather, it was the conscience of the young people who refused to fight in a conflict that was not just which gave Moses the command. During the segment, the direct line was the most important aspect. Moses turned his gaze directly towards Pharaoh. "I regret to inform you, Mr. President, but I will no longer be of use to you. Please take your army with you and leave." The crowd in the studio provided a round of applause in response to the line. In contrast, CBS interpreted it as a direct assault on the Nixon administration, which was something that the executives had been attempting to avoid for a number of months. The performance came to a close with a brief musical number. There was a folk trio that emerged and played a song called "No More Promised Lands." The group was modeled like the three apostles Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was a call to action for young people to stop following the march and rewrite the map, and the lyrics were about rejecting hollow promises from the state. At the conclusion of the scene, Steinberg threw his shawl into the audience and yelled out, "Peace, not war. Be a preacher." As is customary, the recording was delivered to CBS. In contrast to the programs that came before it, this one was halted immediately after it was shown. According to CBS, the show had missed its deadline for review, which was a violation of the production agreement that the network had for the episode. The instant response that Tom Smothers provided was that he asserted that the tape had been delivered to the Hollywood censors in a timely manner. According to him, the issue was with the New York headquarters, where the review procedure had been exceptionally drawn out on account of its length. In the course of internal meetings, executives at CBS, led by William Paley, asked that Steinberg's performance be completely erased from the episode in order for it to be available for broadcast. Mr. Tom declined. The contract that CBS had with the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was terminated on April 4, 1969. In addition, there was no formal news conference, and viewers were not given any prior notification. During the next week, the show's time slot was taken over by Hee Haw, a rural comedy show that was less controversial than the previous one. In spite of the fact that the program was never shown in the United States, a copy of it was broadcast on CTV in Canada, which was not subject to the censorship of CBS. Through the use of bootleg recordings and VHS cassettes that were circulated unofficially among college students, the content that was prohibited became widely recognized very quickly. College newspapers and journals devoted to young culture published articles that provided an analysis of the content of the episode. One individual referred to it as a bitter but deserving farewell for a show that had the courage to express what others had avoided saying. A sharp gap emerged among the public's reactions. The younger viewers, on the other hand, saw it as evidence that CBS had compromised their right to freedom of expression in order to ensure their political safety. A number of cities saw the emergence of minor demonstrations, notably in the vicinity of the local CBS offices. While this was going on, some conservative organizations lauded the decision to cancel the event, describing it as an essential step to safeguard the morality of the general population. The occurrence was not only the primary cause of the program's termination, but also became a symbol of the ultimate frontier that American television at the time could not transcend. Without a personal scandal or a financial catastrophe, there was no crisis. A 5-minute anti-war segment featuring a contentious character was sufficient to bring an end to a show that was rated so highly on a national scale. The downfall of Tom and Dick Smothers, as well as their legacy. Both their careers and their reputations suffered as a result of the cut. For a number of years, they were not invited back to show on television. Almost shortly after being broadcast on a national scale, the offers vanished. Tom turned out to be a challenging candidate to hire, deemed to be excessively hazardous for the network. In spite of the fact that he was more careful, Dick was also identified with the image of the other half of a program that was problematic. Every door in the television industry that had been opened for them was quickly shut. On the other hand, a confidential legal battle started behind the scenes. In their lawsuit against CBS, the Smothers Brothers claimed that the cancellation of the show, which was predicated on late episodes, was nothing more than an excuse for breaking the contract. More than 4 years passed during the course of the lawsuit. As a result of CBS's violation of the co-production contract, a court found in their favor in 1973 and ordered the company to pay more than $770,000 money. Despite the fact that they were successful in court, they were never able to restore the stature they had held on television. Additionally, throughout that time period, the relationship that Tom and Dick shared was put to the test. Later, in an interview, Dick expressed his disagreement with Tom's obstinacy, saying that he did not totally agree with it. He was of the opinion that the show could have been extended for a longer period of time and had a more significant impact if Tom had made some concessions. The two, however, continued to be close on stage. Despite the fact that they were no longer appearing on television, they continued to provide live performances in smaller theaters, which allowed them to keep their devoted fan base. The decision made by CBS to remove the show caused a phenomenon that was felt throughout the whole media business. A great number of young producers, one of whom being Lorne Michaels, who would go on to develop Saturday Night Live, interpreted it as a lesson in the limitations of creative freedom when confronting the power structure of television. Michaels once stated that there would be no Saturday Night Live if it were not for the Smothers Brothers. Despite its brief run, the show established a precedent for mixed media and political television for the first time anywhere. The influence of the show spread beyond the confines of the industry. Young performers, particularly those working in the comedy industry, started referring to the show as a symbol of repression. The tapes that were censored became souvenirs and were distributed by students and independent artists at this time. Some of the designs that CBS had previously rejected were eventually found in the private archives of the writers, which added to the symbolism of censorship. The brothers and the program have been viewed differently over the course of time, which has resulted in a shift in their reputation. Tom Smothers was presented with an honorary Emmy Award in the year 2008, which was nearly 40 years after the show had been pulled off the air. During his address, he conveyed the simple message that peace is more difficult than war, a statement that has been widely used in the media ever since. In 2010, both were elected into the Television Academy Hall of Fame, marking a substantial restoration of honor that had been delayed for a far longer period of time. Their narrative is also considered to be a part of the history of free expression in the United States, which is not within the realm of the entertainment industry. At the beginning of the 1970s, Tom and Dick were listed on the list of adversaries that the Nixon administration maintained. Despite the fact that they did not experience the same immediate consequences as certain politicians, the fact that they were included on the list was considered to be clear evidence that the show had actually embarrassed the administration, which was something that very few television shows had done in the past. A complete archive of the show, including scripts, tapes, and sketches that have not been shown, will be transferred to the University of California, Santa Barbara by the year 2022. This is the first time that a significant number of the show's internal materials have been made accessible to academics. This includes some sketches that CBS had previously requested to be destroyed. The digitization of the archives will be of great assistance in reshaping the memory of the show, particularly for a younger generation that has never witnessed the triumphant age of protest television. Around the time that Tom Smothers passed away in the latter half of 2023, social media was flooded with condolences from notable comedians, old stage images, and video from his shows. Numerous others, including Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and Sarah Silverman, have referred to him as a pioneer in the field of contemporary political humor. They did not speak of him as a legend from the past. Rather, they spoke of him as a part of the roots that established American television as more daring and more vocal. However, the show is seeing a sudden and unexpected resurgence in popular memory, and it is doing so from an unusual source. It is the internet. The VHS cassettes that were originally circulated among college students are now being digitized and are fast spreading on various video sharing platforms such as YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok. A song that was not heard at all. Innumerable memes and parodies have been created with the statement, "Mom always liked you best," serving as the source of inspiration. In the present political atmosphere, a video clip of Pat Paulson's fictitious campaign from 1968, in which he vowed to fix all issues by waiting for them to go away, has been shared as many as millions of times. Now regarded as classics of intelligent satire, sketches that were formerly deemed to be excessively sensitive are now considered the best. The rediscovery is not merely an expression of nostalgia, rather it is is a late acknowledgement of a show that was an innovator in its field. There is ongoing exploration of the archives of the University of California, Santa Barbara by researchers, students, and documentarians. A more complete picture of the magnitude and severity of the intervention that the program was subjected to can be obtained through the utilization of unaired video, handwritten notes written by Tom Smothers, cut sketches, and answer letters from CBS. Not only do viewers get to witness the finished result, but they also get to see the struggles that went into designing each and every minute of airtime when they attend tiny exhibitions. There has been a distinct response from the modern comedy community. A number of contemporary hosts, including John Oliver, Trevor Noah, and Hassan Minhaj, have all recognized that the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour has had an impact on the way that they generate their work. The reason for this is not the structure of the show, but rather the manner in which it illustrated that comedy is not a means of escaping reality, but rather a tool for reaction and debate. In the course of the formation of contemporary critical television, the show is frequently mentioned in the context of media conferences. The program resonance continues to live on through its phrases, its symbolism, and its unyielding spirit, despite the fact that it is no longer broadcast on television. Young viewers were given their first glance at the whole episode of The Forbidden Sermon, which had been barred from the broadcast in 1969, when fragments from the program were re-aired at a memorial event that was held at the New York Television Festival. With a level of directness that very few shows today are willing to reveal, the content continues to be crisp and even shocking, contrary to the expectations that it will become obsolete in the near future. In retrospect, the comedic hour that the Smothers Brothers performed did not consider itself to be iconic. The reactions that it elicited from viewers, networks, governments, and ultimately popular culture were what ultimately led to its status as an iconic event. An example of television that is bold, contrarian, and uncompromising is a show that was canceled because it spoke out. This show has become one of the clearest illustrations of how television can be. Leave a comment if you believe that the events that transpired during the Comedy Hour hosted by the Smothers Brothers are not merely a thing of the past, but rather something that continues to have an impact in the present day. If such a show were to air in the present day, what would you think? Do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with anyone who believes in the importance of freedom of speech, enjoys watching television, and is curious in the reason why a comedy act once sparked a national debate. If you have not yet subscribed, you should do so right away. As the Smothers Brothers did, there are a great number of stories that have not been told, episodes that have been forbidden, and stages that have been canceled that are ready to be told again. The voice was not muted.